Sporting Journal Radio, presented by Onyx.
Now it's time to head up to Lake of the Woods to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism to find out what's going on that big lake. And Joe, we shared something into the Sporting Journal Radio Insiders group the other day. It was something from the Lake of the Woods Tourism page. You had gone up there and caught an eelpout, and everybody, I feel like a lot of people like to cut those fish open and see what they're feeding on, and it's a great way to learn some knowledge to figure out what you should use, as far as lures go next time you're up there. But you cut into one and found some interesting stuff in there.
Well, and the thing of it is, I don't cut into every fish I catch, but in this case, the gut was so big, the stomach was so big, you knew there's something in there, and it's like, okay, what is this eelpout, been eating? So I cut it open, and what it was is there was actually a pretty darn good size walleye in there, and on top of the walleye, there was a whole bunch of crayfish this eelpout was eating. I mean, this eelpout was eaten well. And you can kind of see if you're watching the video portion of it right now where we pull it out. And, that walleye, I don't know if it's a 10-inch walleye or what it is, but pretty good size forage for that pout. Of course, it's a big pout too,
How big was the pout? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, probably 8 pounds.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get a reference on how long, because he sometimes, I think people don't realize how big of forage some of these fish will eat. Even some smaller fish, they'll end up taking down some fish that are much bigger than you'd expect them to.
Well, Brett, I tried measuring that eelpout, and after a half a day of trying to get it to straighten out for me, I just thought I'd give up.
Right. And crayfish, I think just about every fish feeds on them. Smallmouth, walleyes, eelpout feeds on those. It doesn't seem like something that would be easy to, it seems painful, to eat a whole crayfish like that seems painful to me.
Oh, I tell you, fish love them. In fact, I've caught walleyes before that actually have little cuts on the top of their head from diving down into the rocks, nailing crayfish. So yeah, no, fish love them. In fact, there's times of the year where, when you are fishing, using your golden oranges, gold or orange, or your reds, or, things like that for your colors is very conducive because they are feeding on crayfish. And I remember one time I was fishing a tournament and we were pulling spinners, probably 6 boats in a tournament. And there was one boat that was clearly out fishing the rest of us. And, talking to they were friends of mine, talking to them afterwards, they had realized that there was a crayfish deal going on there in the rocks. And they had an orangish red spinner blade because we were pulling spinners again. And, that was a ticket that caught 2-1 versus any other color.
Well, when we were up at Lake of the Woods last summer, it was a crayfish bite. The fish were all up on the rocks, and that's where we spent most of our time and did really well while we were up there. Joe,
talk about forage on Lake of the Woods, Brett. You think so that fish right there ate a walleye, it ate crayfish. Somebody just had an underwater camera down in 30 feet of water, and Lake of the Woods normally is that stained water, which it is, but the water had been a little bit clearer, I think, because of the low flow, and you could actually see fairly well. And it amazed me the amount of life down there, just the different kind of bugs and critters moving around on the bottom. No fish even, but just it's like an aquarium full of forage. And that's, of course, one of the reasons Lake of the Woods is so sustainable is that there's so much forage, so many different forms of forage.
Lots of forage under the ice and some forage above the ice for humans. Once again, this winter, there's a bar on the ice up there, Joe.
Yeah, it's part of that's forage, part of that's hydration, and
probably more hydration.
The Igloo Bar on the ice. It goes out of Zipple Bay Resort, and it's out. So it's all set up. It's 1,000 square feet. It's got 2 big screen TVs. It's got a full bar. It's got a partial hot menu. You can actually fish inside the bar. Brett, how many bartenders do you know have a fresh bucket of minnows behind the bar each and every day?
Well, I've known a couple that had nothing to do with fishing, and you don't want to go to those bars. But we went in there when we snowmobiled across the lake a couple years ago, Joe. We went in there and checked that place out. It's got to be one of the most unique bars I've ever been in.
Oh, it's incredible. They put it out in 2 different pieces, and it's like an igloo, and you can actually fish. They got rattle reels there, or you can bring in a rod and reel in. So you can have a drink, watch the wild game, fish. It's real festive. People come from all over the lake to go there. Of course, a lot of people staying in sleepers and things at Zipple Bay will go there. Once in a while, they'll even have a performer go in there and play some live music. It is cool. It's funny. I asked Nick Painovich is the owner of Zipple Bay Resort, and I asked they got little igloo porta potties outside the Igloo Bar, and they're heated. And I said, Nick, how come you actually heat your porta potties? Normally you never see that. He goes, well, I'll tell you what happened. He said the gals are giving me a hard time because those seats were so cold. So I started heating the women's, and then all the guys started using it. So then I had to heat them both. So I thought that was kind of fun. And, it is neat. I mean, to imagine that bar is about 3 miles out on the lake. And each and every year they'll catch 40-plus inch pipe. They'll catch nice walleyes out of there. I mean, it's just kind of a novelty, the fishing part of it, but it's people really enjoy going there.
Could you imagine sitting there and putting one of those guys that's putting in a shift, right? That you see at the bar that sits there for a couple of hours and he's just, starting to one-eye it a little bit, and he looks over and the guy next to him is just all of a sudden pulling a 42-inch pike up out of the floor.
Well, I tell you what, one of the bartenders there, Jenny, she, I think the first thing she probably does when she gets there, usually I think they open at noon, one of the first things she does is puts a big sucker minnow down, and she pulls numerous 40-plus inch pike, each year out of there. And it's just what they do. And I got to tell you, when I asked Nick, I said, Nick, it gets pretty festive in there when somebody catches a fish. He says, you should see what happens when somebody loses one.
Well, there's some to that. When we went out and spent the night on the lake the other night, and may have had a beer or two, most of us were just kind of sitting around hanging out, solving the world's problems. And we had all rattle reels or dead sticks down. And that's something, just might as well be fishing while you're out there. But you can have a lot of success when you're not actually jigging those rods, I think, sometimes.
I'll tell you, and we always say in Minnesota you can use 2 lines. So you want to do that 1-2 punch. You jig one line and then you dead stick the other line. And, that dead stick can be a key component to put more walleyes on the ice. A few things, and you need to work the dead stick. You don't just put a minnow down under a bobber and just let it sit and that's it. You got to work it. So what I mean by working it, Brett, is pay attention to what's going on in the fish house. Normally that golden area is 6 inches to a foot off the bottom. I know some anglers that'll put their minnows 3 feet off the bottom and make those fish swim up for them. That sometimes that can be a triggering effect. Sometimes you use a shiner. Sometimes you use a fathead. Sometimes you use a small sucker. Sometimes you go to a small crappie minnow if it's a real neutral mode because of cold weather. Sometimes, I've seen where people have used dead shiners, and they prefer the dead minnows over the live minnows. Sometimes when they hook a minnow, they'll hook it under the back dorsal. Sometimes they hook it in the lips. Sometimes they hook it down on the bottom of the minnow, so it's upside down, and the minnow will constantly try to right itself. Oftentimes, you might use a small ice jig or a glow jig with your minnow. Gold, glow, your glow reds, things like that. On other times, just a plain hook will do well. A plain hook could be just a plain red hook, or that could be a plain hook that's got that glow on it, like a glow white plain hook. Your sinker. Sometimes if you put your sinker real close to the minnow, that minnow can't move around as much. If you put your sinker higher up and have a bigger gap between your hook and your sinker, that minnow has more freedom to swim. So all those little nuances, instead of using a bobber, sometimes I'll take a rod with a real flexible tip, and I'll just set my depth with either a bobber stop or just knowing where the depth is with my Vexilar. And I'll just watch that rod tip, because sometimes you get real light biters that'll just pull that rod tip down a little bit, almost like a spring bobber. Not that sensitive, but you know what I mean? And I tell you what, there's times where it would be real hard to see that bobber move under those conditions.
Sure. Well, I see there's an article with some of those tips on your website. People can find that there, as well as more information about where to go at Lake of the Woods. What's that website, Joe?
You know what? Hey, all the information's there, Brett. Check out lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Hear more at sportingjournalradio.com or wherever you get podcasts.